tonight on the Cover One Buffalo podcast, we are joined by Nick Falato of Big Blue to break down Bills Giants. But first, our guys, Handsome Jack.
Broadcasting live to Bills Mafia worldwide with Greg Tompsett and Aaron Quinn.
Welcome to the NFL. Doesn't matter what's happened before today. Today's a brand new day. It's a brand new season.
Your number one podcast for objective Buffalo Bills coverage. No matter where you are, we got you covered.
Good evening and welcome to the Cover One Buffalo podcast. You are joining your host, Greg Tompsett, along with my partner in crime, Aaron Quinn. Aaron.
Yo.
How we doing?
I'm okay, Greg. I'm okay. I'm okay. We were talking offline a little bit of a weird week. Obviously, the loss sucked. That lingered into a really just terrible weather weekend of just cold, windy, gross October weather. It's officially weather October in Western New York. The Bills drop a game they shouldn't, and the weather stinks. That feels just about right. But then it was Columbus Day weekend, so that made the whole week. You know how I am with my habits and getting ready for the show. So it feels weird getting ready for this one. I didn't watch back that Jaguars game as much as I should, fortunately for me, but really put a damper on getting ready for this week. So excited for the show to get past that, move forward. I didn't even change my sign this week, Greg. Like, that's where I'm at in life. So hoping to move past that here this evening with you and the rest of Bills Mafia watching with us.
Yeah. It's we'll talk about it when we have Nick on here. That obviously, I think that one, it's great timing for the Bills to need to get their stuff together and get things figured out. It's probably not ideal timing for the Giants, that the Bills need a get right game and have a pretty good history of not stringing together multiple losses and have a very, not perfect record, but a very good record coming off a loss compared to other teams. And now in a spot where some of the guys who had to step in the moment, not that they weren't prepared. Obviously, I think everybody kind of says the same thing of like, yeah, we're preparing as though we're the starter. It's different when you don't know that you're going to be immediately inserted. And now having a spot where those guys, although not up to the standard of the guys they're replacing, they at least get the full week of preparation and knowing that they're going to have to step into the game.
Yeah.
And I think that goes a long ways to give a little more reassurance, and now a matchup that not that they will, but that they should have some advantages in.
Yeah, and obviously we'll get into the sort of meat and potatoes of the matchup here as we go along, but not to ever take any opponent lightly. But in getting ready for this, and you talk about the Bills needing to get that win and get right, in terms of those players coming in, they're going to have to take over some big roles here. This also lines up real nice in terms of those types of games that you can gain confidence from, right? Like if the Bills go out and play the type of game that we think that they should in a game like this is going to give some of those players that are coming up and getting a little bit more playing time, hopefully some more confidence. You don't want to throw them out up against, the top type team. You don't want to go up against KC with a bunch of young guys playing in their first game or getting their first starts. This is unfortunately injury riddled Bills team right now, but to your point, lining up with an opponent that actually gives you probably an opportunity to ease your way into that.
Yeah, and I think that, it's important to have that mindset. And without further ado, we will bring on our special guest of the evening, Nick Falato. Everyone here has seen you around working, obviously, with Big Blue View and much of your work writing for various sites. Let the folks know where they can find all your good work.
Firstly, Greg, Aaron, thank you so much for having me on the show. I have to say, listening to you guys commiserate about the Bills in a depressive manner infuriates me, because I cover the New York Giants professionally, and it is absolutely terrible over there. But you can find me on Twitter at Nick Falato. I host a podcast with Dan Schneier of CBS. It's called Big Blue Banter. We focus on the X's and O's. If anybody wants an in-depth look at the mess that the New York Giants are right now in 2023, please check that out wherever you get podcasts or on YouTube. And I write for Big Blue View of SB Nation. How are we doing, fellas?
And some people don't know, used to roll with us back in the day.
I'm sorry, you cut out a little bit there, Aaron.
Sorry, Nick, that you used to roll with us at Cover One back in the day. Not a lot of people know that.
I did. Yeah. I had an independent New York podcast. I didn't focus on the Buffalo Bills, but I was on that specific network. And that's how I met Eric and all you guys. And it's always a pleasure seeing you guys down in Mobile and hanging out and shooting the shit with y'all.
Yeah, it's fun. And like you said, having the connection now where when the Bills first kind of got their new regime in here, we saw that pipeline coming from Carolina, and you saw McDermott and Bean came over. They obviously knew whether it was position coaches, scouts, players. You saw kind of that pipeline come with, and it's now kind of taken a sharp turn to the east, and we now have Buffalo East Rutherford division going on, and obviously have everybody that Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen have brought with from, almost a dozen players across the roster and the practice squad, as well as multiple position coaches. And we were talking before the show in that how many similarities there are between the restart in Buffalo and the restart in New York. You had, guys coming in together as a pair of a coach and a GM, and that, having a history together before coming in where there was some talent on a roster, but not seen as
cleaning up from a pretty terrible GM.
Yeah, correct. Having a mess of previous regimes and building together a playoff team in the first season. And I think a lot of Giants fans may not remember and may not realize the Bills took a pretty material step back in that second year with some strategic decisions, trading away Tyrod Taylor, trading away Cordy Glenn, so, pulling together a bunch of draft picks to make a big investment in a quarterback. They went 6-10, but they had built up so much cachet in that first year that it was tolerated. It was understood. There was a lot going the right direction. Where are the heads of Giants fans now, coming off the excitement of last year, not only making the playoffs, but a road playoff victory, investments into some major players? We love Dexter Lawrence. Andrew Thomas obviously looks like a superstar. The choice between Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley. Where are Giants fans' heads at coming off last year and now separating injuries from play here in this season?
So I don't know if you guys know this, but football fans aren't always the most rational, and especially when you live in a city like New York. But I think generally speaking, there's still a long leash with Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll. This isn't the Joe Judge era. I don't believe their seat's warm. I don't think it's hot right now. I think everybody recognizes what is going on. I think Murphy's Law has applied to this entire season. Last season, the Giants were fortunate. They won some very close football games. Brian Daboll was able to construct an offense to maximize the strengths of Daniel Jones, who frankly is a limited quarterback. But you could still win with him if everything around him is going well. Well, week 1, first drive of the season for this offense, blocked field goal by Dallas, returned for a touchdown. Andrew Thomas tweaks his hamstring. Ever since then, it's been a cascading effect of things just going downhill. Next game, Giants have this miraculous comeback against an Arizona Cardinals team. Saquon Barkley gets hurt. And now you're down I would say your two best offensive players. John Michael Schmitz ends up getting hurt. Ben Bredesen is playing at center. You have a guard starting at tackle. Just everything has gone wrong. And that's where Joe Schoen, I would say, I don't want to blame him, but every risk that Joe Schoen took has come back to bite him in the rear end this year. The Giants kept Lawrence Cager as their third tight end. Daniel Bellinger is the only blocking tight end on this roster, with Darren Waller as the number 1. First drive of the game, Monday Night Football against Seattle. What happens? Daniel Bellinger gets hurt. Giants run 12 personnel 43% of the time. With Daniel Bellinger out, Darren Waller now has to step up and be that blocking tight end. How many catches did Darren Waller have in that game? You barely even noticed him on prime time. Giants didn't run 12 personnel, though, one time after Daniel Bellinger's injury. That was a risk, keeping Lawrence Cager over another blocking tight end. You didn't have a backup center. You said, Ben Bredesen, we'll cross-train him. He'll do it. Ben Bredesen did end up getting hurt, but Ben Bredesen kicks over to center, and now Ben Bredesen is struggling with calls, and there's miscommunications on the line. Josh Azudu, you don't have a backup tackle that you're confident in. You don't even want to play Matt Peart there. You have Josh Azudu out there. Josh Azudu was getting his ass kicked because Andrew Thomas is no longer there, and they have a guard playing tackle. So every risk that Joe Schoen took ended up biting him in the rear end, and that's an issue with the team. In terms of Brian Daboll, though, look, man, he can only do what he can with the roster that he has. And I'm not blaming Joe Schoen, per se. I don't want to come off that way. But with that offensive line, you can't do all that much. And that brings up Bobby Johnson, who I know you guys are quite familiar with. And Bobby Johnson, he's on the hot seat. I don't want to opine on things that I don't fully comprehend or fully understand. I'm not in the offensive line room, right? I'm not there. So I don't know. But the one thing I will say, every young offensive lineman that the latter years of Dave Gettleman drafted and Joe Schoen selected, none of them, zero, not one has developed or taken any sort of step since they got into the NFL. And that's where my criticism with Bobby Johnson kind of lies, because that's bad. You have the top 7 pick, Evan Neal, in the draft, doing absolutely nothing for your team, being a liability at right tackle. Josh Azuda, you're moving him everywhere. A kid can't get comfortable. Marcus McKeithen tore his ACL last year, so I'll excuse that. He looks overmatched right now. But yeah, in terms of their where they are with the Giants fan base, they have a long leash, but the magic that was established from last year's season has been lost.
How do you, in your head, when you're talking about a new regime coming in, and obviously to Greg's point, you have some of that success early, and obviously the fan base sees that success and wants to, okay, we can just add some things to that and continue to make success. But obviously Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll and that front office had a plan to come in and change this roster over time. And some of the issues that you're seeing, some of the things that you're saying, all the moves Schoen made are the ones, some of the decisions are backfiring. How many years are you giving these guys to get the depth of this roster, right? Like, so on our side, as you heard us commiserating about having to play some young players, it took a while for this build for Brandon Beane to get the roster depth to a spot that when you have an injury along the offensive line, it isn't devastating and it doesn't have this massive ripple effect throughout your entire offensive line. It doesn't appear that your guys' roster is there yet, right? You have some top end players, you have some decent players, but the depth hasn't been built up in the way that they would like it to be. So where you're talking about this leash, how many seasons do these guys have to bring in the right amount of depth so that one injury early in the season doesn't become such a devastating trickle effect throughout the entire roster?
I think the Giants are in a unique spot right now to where it might be a little bit difficult to answer that question, because you just re-signed a quarterback from a previous regime that isn't playing up to that contract of $40 million a year. So let's fast forward, say Daniel Jones continues to struggle and nothing happens. Giants can get out of that contract. They had to push it back a little bit, but they can get out of that contract after 2 seasons now. So
will you keep that front office after 2 seasons?
That's the big question. I think John Mara does not want to recycle coaches like he's done. He gave Pat Shermer 2 years, Ben McAdoo 2 years, and Joe Judge 2 years. He doesn't want to do that. Brian Daboll just won Coach of the Year. I don't necessarily see, well, I don't think it's going to happen this year unless something absolutely insane ends up happening. I think but Giant fans, you got to produce in this city. If you don't produce, you are screwed. But in terms of just the depth of the roster, guys, I think you got to start with the first draft, which I believe Joe Schoen, he was working with a lot of Dave Gettleman scouts. He came over from Buffalo, didn't have that entire college pre-draft process, understanding that he was the Giants general manager. So he bet on traits and he bet on young players like Josh Azuda, like Cordell Flott, who's like 170 pounds when the Giants drafted him on day 2. He actually looked solid last week, though, cornerback out of LSU. But it really comes down, you have 2 top 10 picks. Kayvon Thibodeau, he has 4 sacks. That matches his total from last season. But when you watch him, it's not like he's dominating the game and he's pressuring the quarterback all the time. And he's not necessarily a sound run defender quite yet. So Kayvon Thibodeau, you want to see a little bit more from him. And then Evan Neal has just been an abject disaster. So how are you going to rectify that situation? I don't want to project too far in the future and be this is how many years they've had. But this is a significant step down from last season, not just in regards to the draft picks and all that. But last year, Joe Schoen murdered the free agent pool. He brought in Fabian Moreau, who ended up starting for them, and he was excellent. Nick McLeod, Isaiah Hodgins, you guys are quite familiar with both of those players, played key roles for the New York Giants. Right now, everybody that Joe Schoen signed to improve this roster has underwhelmed. Deshaun Robinson is MIA. Raheem Nunez-Roches, he's a defensive lineman who are supposed to be depth pieces, hasn't really done much. TJ Davidson is out playing both of those players, a 5th-round rookie from the 2022 draft. And then Darren Waller, look, I think Darren Waller's fine. I don't think he's lost a step, but the Giants can't find or give him the football when you can't block up front. So there's just a lot of issues inherently with this roster, but I don't know how I can project forward on how long they have. I think we're just going to take it a week at a time right now.
So obviously, let's dive a little bit into the matchup here. And on the offensive side of the ball, I think if we're coming in and we're talking about Andrew Thomas, who I think rightfully is looked at as an all-pro, up-and-coming premier tackle. Saquon Barkley, maybe the best athlete in the NFL at running back. And then you're talking about Darren Waller and the other pieces. And I don't think there's any assumption that there's an alpha in the wide receiver room, but there is depth of talent in the wide receiver room and in a group of talented guys. Instead, I'm trying to figure out what exactly is an Azudu. I don't know what that is. And just how you're supposed to get any kind of intelligent read from what this offensive line is. Down in Mobile, I love John Michael Schmitz. That was there. Luckily, we ended up with kind of the two guys I had ranked at the top of the list as the draft was going. You guys snuck JMS, and we ended up with Osiris Torrance. That's worked out, I think, nicely for both teams. But now he's struggling to get back on the field. Let's start with that line. I saw that Thomas wasn't back today. I heard some rumors of a setback last week. Is there any expectation he's going to play? And if he's not there, is it just kind of that domino effect of nobody else is able to kind of step forward and solidify what's in front of Jones?
Yeah, Andrew Thomas, I'd be surprised if he played. I don't even know when we're going to see Andrew Thomas, which is a big issue. Last week, when Daniel Jones ended up suffering the neck injury, Josh Azudu was crying in the locker room after the guy. I feel terrible for the kid. This is a day 2 pick, though, from this regime, but he was a guard. And he played some tackle at UNC, and people think he can play tackle because he has quick feet and he's long. I think he's a guard, though. So you're probably going to be forced to play either him or Matt Peart in that situation, and it's frightening because Buffalo Bills, you guys blitz what, like 12.9% of the snaps? I think it's dead last in the league. Yeah. Yet you get the third
high. Yeah, one of the highest sack rates or highest pressure rate, lowest blitz rate. That is not an ideal scenario for two struggling tackles.
It's not the ideal scenario. And it's not even just the tackles. You have a guard playing center trying to make protection calls. You have Marcus McKeithen, who shouldn't be starting. And then they're begrudgingly starting the one player that a lot of us thought would be a starter in Mark Lewinsky, who got benched after the Dallas game. Mark Lewinsky was an Indianapolis Colt. He's a consummate professional, or at least he was. Comes to the Giants, struggled last year. I think he's better than a lot of the players the Giants are trotting out there. But the Giants want to play these young guys, and they don't really have many other players. The one player that I have to acknowledge, the Giants, and this is the state of the Giants offensive line, ladies and gentlemen, they signed Justin Pugh to the practice squad last week. I don't think they want to bring him up. I'm excited about this team activating Justin Pugh if they decide to activate them. Last week, they activated both the practice squad activations, Jalen Thomas, a UDFA, and then it was Jalen Mayfield, the former second-round pick out of Michigan by the Atlanta Falcons. Neither of them should ever see a football field in the NFL. Both of them had to play. Mayfield played like 48 snaps. It was really difficult to watch. But if I'm Daniel Jones, first of all, I have a neck injury. I don't know why you would want to be out there and playing in this game. Tyrod, maybe he can add a spark or something to the team, kindle some sort of magic. But right now with this offensive line, the state of this offensive line, it's difficult to see a path to how this offense can establish any sort of consistency, especially since they're so undisciplined and they can so many false start penalties, and they can't pick up simple blitzes and protections, simple twists and stunts. It's a disaster right now.
Heard a lot of Christian Wilkins' name on the broadcast.
Yeah, he's
in that Miami game. But we got a question here. Who is the quarterback after Tyrod Taylor? I don't know the roster that well, but there is not a QB on the active roster, right?
No, there's not a quarterback on the active roster. In the practice squad, it's New Jersey great Tommy DeVito. Went to Syracuse, went to Illinois.
That's a very New Jersey.
So New Jersey of a name. It's so fantastic.
Oh my God. It's the most New Jersey thing in the world. But
yeah,
he had a good preseason, showed a lot of signs, but obviously you can't have him starting in the game. And I don't even know, man.
But Tyrod goes down. Didn't Tyrod get the wind knocked out of him? Like, I feel like he takes a lot of hits as well behind this offensive line.
Yeah,
so it was a cool question. I saw the question. I was like, hey, I don't actually know who would come in that event.
If Tyrod suffered a serious injury, let's say, on that play, Brian Daboll, he didn't say who, but he came out and he was like, we had a plan. We have an emergency quarterback. And then someone pressed him on it, like another journalist, and he was like, we have an emergency quarterback. It was just really terse with his response. But I've also seen this floated around. Matt Barkley isn't currently on a roster, very familiar with Brian Daboll's system. I wouldn't be shocked to see him get signed to the practice squad. We just saw Cole Beasley get signed to the practice squad off of the IR. So I don't know if the Giants are going to be able to call Beasley up for this game. Maybe they will, but like I said, they're probably going to use both those call-ups again on the offensive line, because you just need as many bodies out there. I don't even know if McKeithen's going to play. And when you're relying on a former 6th-round pick, it's like, what? This is just the state. I thought we were done with this after 2021. Like, the Giants' offensive line was terrible in 2021, and we're right back here. It's like they gave us 1 year of not even good offensive line play, but adequate offensive line play, and we've regressed beneath the mean now. It's just terrible.
So with the pass catchers, I think that obviously there was some excitement. Jalen Hyatt was crazy speedster. That doesn't come into play when you don't have time to do 5, let alone 7-step drops. There's been some kind of schemed up touches for Wan'Dale Robinson. The Paris Campbell signing hasn't paid off in the way that they thought. You still have, Slayton and Shepard are veterans there. Isaiah Hodgins hasn't quite had the same opportunity as the year before. Ideally, if everyone, say the offensive line gets back to where it is, Thomas is back in here, what is the actual tier and playing time ideally from that receiving group where there's 6 or 7 guys that I don't even know who should be 1, 2, and 3?
So that's an interesting question because I don't know if the Giants have a actual blueprints like this is our 11 personnel package. They went into this season saying we're going to rotate our players based on personnel. They really wanted to play the matchups. If I had to pick 3, I would say Darius Slayton, Wan'Dale Robinson, and later in the season, it was, I think, going to be Jalen Hyatt, but I think it's Isaiah Hodgins. Those were the 3 that I was expecting, but I knew Paris Campbell was going to be mixed in a lot. I knew a lot of those 4 were going to be just cycled into the 11 personnel package. And the Giants love running 12 personnel. Daniel Bellinger's an underrated football player in general. And he's the only tight end who can block. And then Darren Waller was going to be the focal point of this passing attack. We saw a little bit of it last week, but still not enough. And a lot of that was kind of in garbage time with Tyrod Taylor. So that would be my answer, though. It would be Darius Slayton, Isaiah Hodgins, and Wan'Dale Robinson. But it's not a set in stone thing with this coaching staff because there really is no alpha dog here.
Yeah. So the last one on the offensive side of the ball, are we going to see Saquon? I know I saw the clip today, heavily taped right ankle. It looked like it was, there, but he was moving. He was doing drills back out there. It looks like there's at least a possibility here. Obviously, his prodigious talent changes everything of the possibilities in a game like this. Even the games that the Bills blew out the opponent, each of them had big chunk run plays going on. So if anyone's going to give themselves a recipe of what a Giants either upset or more competitive, a Giants cover in a competitive game, it's going to involve a Saquon performance, in my opinion. Do you think you're going to see it?
I question it. And if I'm Saquon Barkley, do I really want to rush back, especially if Daniel Jones doesn't play? You gave me a contract that I'm not happy with on a 1-year deal. I'm a free agent next year. I rushed back in 2019 from this same injury, a high ankle sprain, and I struggled for about 3 or 4 weeks before I just blew up at the end of the season. If I'm Saquon, and if I'm Saquon's agent, more specifically, I'm in his ear saying that. But Barkley is an ultimate competitor, guys. Like, he wants to go out there. He wants to be there for his guys. And this is a Sunday night football game, so I wouldn't be surprised if he can go and if there is no risk of further re-injuring that high ankle sprain that we do see him. But I think it would be on a little bit more of a limited basis. But if I had to put money on it right now, I lean no, but I really don't have a read on that situation. It's just, man, these high ankle sprains, it's tough. And we've already seen this with Saquon in the past. Like, I don't even know who the quarterback is going to be. That's
having the legitimate concern of it's a high ankle sprain. You need to be careful with those anyways, without sprinkling in the contract and the tension and all those other pieces. That certainly is an interesting dynamic.
It's a tough one there too, because you got obviously the offensive line plays a part in this. The lack of not knowing who your quarterback plays a part in this. Going up against the Buffalo Bills plays a part in this, right? And all the offseason stuff that you talked about, getting that franchise tag, having to play. Like, now you guys are in a position, losing games, dropping out of playoff contention where business decisions gets made, and fans don't want to hear about what goes into business decisions. And so it's a tough spot for him to be on. To your point, I'm sure agents are in his ear saying like, hey, why don't you just let this ride out a couple weeks here and get back and let's get some of these offensive linemen healthy again before we rush you back out.
Exactly. And also, if the Giants lose to you guys, which is plausible to say the least, Washington and the Jets, they might be sellers at the trade. They have a lot of older players who, like Adoree Jackson, Leonard Williams. I don't know who would want to take on that contract. He's making like $30 million a year right now. It's absolutely ridiculous. But then Saquon's name comes up and it's like, would John Mara, the owner of the Giants, and Steve Tisch actually sell this guy? They absolutely love Saquon Barkley. Saquon Barkley says and does all the right things. He is the exact player you want representing your franchise. But I don't think Joe Schoen wants to pay him. I don't necessarily blame Joe Schoen for that either, man. The running back is a tough market right now. And Saquon's injured again, and this has kind of plagued him throughout his career. So I just think Shane is in a tough spot with that specific reality of Saquon Barkley.
Yeah. Let's switch over to this defensive side of the ball. So I got to take a look at your guys' defense here. Really, this one's a tough one for me because I love Wink. You don't have the crazy amount of injuries like you do on the offensive side of the ball, yet they are also still underperforming in a similar manner to the offensive side of the ball. They just don't seem to have the bite that they had at times last year and the competitive toughness throughout a game playing at times. But you have guys playing at it. You mentioned that Leonard Williams contract still playing at a good level. I don't think that his level of play is diminished, even though he's getting paid well. Dexter Lawrence is freaking incredible. You've got players along this defense. Thibodeau, I know you were a little down on him when talking about him earlier, but he shows some of the stuff of why he was picked so high. He is a physical freak. He does have a great jump when he gets going. There's a lot there still to work with, even being raw. And I like some of the pieces you've got. As an overall here, before we get into the position groups, what's going on with this defense and why is it the trickle down effect of the offense is so their inability to do anything on offense is just harming the defense, or is the defense taking a step back?
I think there's just a lot of new faces on this defense. The Giants went out, they gave Bobby Okereke a $10 million contract. He's starting to come along, but it was a slow start for Okereke. And I think your assessment there, Aaron, was spot on. The offense is going 3 and out. Like last week, the Giants couldn't contain the explosiveness of Miami's offense as well as the Bills did. I mean, the Giants are not the Bills, but they had 3 takeaways and a pick six, 102-yard pick six.
Yeah.
And
they were in that game like in the third quarter.
I was excited after the pick six.
Yeah. It was wild, man. Jason Pinnock and Bobby Okereke caused both those interceptions, intercepted one of them, and then he tipped the pass to Jason Pinnock. But Dexter Lawrence is balling out this year. I think the new faces, the loss of Julian Love, Jason Pinnock trying to fill in for Julian Love, it hurts the defense a little bit. Deontay Banks, you went into the season with Deontay Banks and a 6th-round rookie as your starters, and then you switched Adoree Jackson to the slot. That experiment hasn't necessarily transpired the way the Giants would have hoped. I think Deontay Banks has been fine this year. He's given up some touchdowns, but he's fine. Not worried about him. But with Adoree Jackson on the outside, now you're relying very heavily on Cordell Flott, who had a solid game against the Miami Dolphins. But this team is blitzing a lot. It's Wink Martindale's philosophy. They're not really getting pressure, though, and they're not really getting sacks, and they're not really getting home. I think one reason for that is the attention paid to Dexter Lawrence, the underwhelming nature of the other defensive linemen, not the edges, but Leonard Williams is disappointing. I think DJ Davidson has been, I said, the third best interior defensive lineman, but it should be Ashawn Robinson, who has some pass rushing juice, but not really. And then Raheem Nunez-Roche is more of just a backup nose. But you're not getting pressure with the defensive line not named Dexter Lawrence. Kayvon Thibodeau, look, I think he's fine, but you need to be more than fine when you're a top 5 pick. And then Azeez Ojulari, to me, is the most explosive player on this offense in terms of rushing the passer. He has more burst and juice than even Kayvon Thibodeau. Just always hurt, man. It's a calf issue, it's a hamstring issue, an ankle issue. It's always something. But when he's out there, you just see him pop. And the combination of him and Kayvon Thibodeau, that's when I'm like, okay, here we go, because they force that quarterback back up into the pocket. Dexter Lawrence is right there, just bullying some poor center right into the lap of the quarterback. We just haven't seen that nearly enough. I think those guys are out there playing a lot. I think they're frustrating. I think the third down defense has been really bad. Last year, they were really efficient on third down. Now they're really not. And against the San Francisco 49ers, we saw 3 third and I think like 15 plus conversions. A lot of it came down to missed tackles. The issue with this team doesn't lie at the feet of Wink Martindale. I think he's being made into a scapegoat, but the unit has certainly regressed a little bit. One thing I will say about Wink Martindale, because I think it's a misnomer, and sorry if I'm going on and droning on here a little bit. His philosophy in his blood, in his DNA, it's pressure, breaks, pipe. That's what he wants to do. But he doesn't get enough credit for being an adaptive play caller and coming up with really game plan specific types of just specific type of game plan against opponents. Like last week, he dropped to cover 2, like 32% of the time. Giants never use cover 2, just straight cover 2 zone. And then he used cover 2 man also a bunch. And the Giants never use that. They're typically a middle of the field closed, single high type of team, or they'll go into cover 4, quarter, stuff like that against more explosive teams. But that was a specific game plan to stop the Miami Dolphins. And what do you do when you align with 2 safeties deep? You're going to be -1 in the box. And that's why we saw so much successful runs from Devon Achane and Raheem Mostert. The Giants weren't gapping themselves out. Also, Micah McFadden, who's one of their it's crazy to say, but one of the better run defenders right now was out, and Isaiah Simmons was on the football field. And Simmons is wildly explosive, but ideally this coaching staff only wants to use Isaiah Simmons in 2nd and 6+ situations. They don't want to use Isaiah Simmons on those obvious running downs because the processing and the physicality isn't quite there. It's not up to the level of a Micah McFadden.
Go
Sorry,
Aaron. No. Finish your thought.
Yeah. The Giants cannot fit power gap. They couldn't fit power gap last year, and they still can't really fit power gap. And they sell out against power gap. Like if you watch the San Francisco 49ers game, Kyle Shanahan, he could do so many different things. It's a zone-based team, but they were doing GT counter. They were showing that to the Giants, and then they were running play action off it because the only way the Giants are defending that is to take the play side linebacker to account for those extra gaps on the pullers and just shooting them aggressively into the C gap, creating a huge void behind. And Kyle Shanahan exploited that. Mike McDaniel didn't really need to exploit that much, but it could have been exploited. So the Giants, man, I don't know if you guys run too much counter and other power gap concepts, but the Giants significantly struggle to fit that. And that dates back to last season.
I do think to that point, the Bills will scheme in things to the opponent, to your point that you're making about Wink Martindale, sort of the same way. I want to touch back on that, but first I want to thank you for talking about running into too high looks, because Bills fans get so mad, and Greg, I'm actually talking to you, when they see a too high look and like a 2nd and long and run into it, just becomes your offensive rules. Right. It becomes your offensive rules though, Nick, right? Like you see cover 2, and it is, I agree with Greg that it is a little bit frustrating because it feels like the defense is then dictating to us because they know that we're going to check into a run and it isn't going to be as successful. But that look does present opportunities for running. But in that idea that Martindale he's known for his blitzing, but he will switch things up. How do you see, based on knowing what you know about Josh Allen and this Buffalo Bills offense, how do you see him sort of building a game plan for this offense? Because I don't think tons of blitzing and tons of pressure is necessarily the way to stop Josh Allen. So I'm interested to see when he dials up that aggressive nature. And we heard Josh Allen today talk about, hey, the league's going away from some of that typical too high stuff. And it's more this palms coverage and quarters coverage, and that the Bills are kind of trying to figure out what works against some of this stuff. Do you expect to see Martindale put in some of the stuff that's been successful against the Bills offense to limit the explosive plays, or are we going to see more of a traditional Martindale send the fire at us?
So it's interesting. If we go back to week 3 against the 49ers, it was send the fire. They blitzed on like 86% of Brock Purdy's dropbacks. Just an insane number, even for Wink Martindale. But heading into week 5, I was like, I don't think the Giants are going to do that against Miami because of the explosive nature. And they didn't. And they really significantly changed that game plan. And I thought they would do the same against the Buffalo Bills until I watched the Jacksonville tape. And I know Josh Allen is a stud against the blitz, but for some reason, he struggled against the blitz a little bit. There's a lot of little short passes. Jacksonville was able to get after them. And I'm wondering if Martindale, maybe he doesn't blitz at an 85% rate, but he dials it back a little bit and picks his spots wisely. But the Giants need to stay in these passing situations. They need to hold the Bills and forcing completions on the early downs to get him into 3rd and 6 and get him into 3rd and 7 so they can load the line of scrimmage. Because that's when Wink Martindale is at his best. He's going to use big nickel, 3 safeties on the field, dime, dollar, quarter, just a bunch of speed, a bunch of defensive backs. The Giants didn't take a base snap at all against the Miami Dolphins. There was no base personnel. Everything was nickel. So you're going to have those lighter packages, and then you crowd the line of scrimmage, and you send 4. You simulate the pressure, or you don't crowd the line of scrimmage, and then you use a creeper, and you still send 4, but who are the 4? And you try to manipulate the protection package of the Buffalo Bills. I could see Martindale doing that, but more so of a just pick and choose your spots. I don't have as good of a read on this as I did against the Miami Dolphins last week, where I was confident they wouldn't blitz as much, just because I saw Josh Allen kind of struggle a little bit against the blitz last week. But you guys would know much better than me. That's not a consistent thing. That was more anomalous, correct?
Correct. Yeah, he actually has one of the best, whether it's EPA or some of the more traditional quarterback ratings, not only against the blitz, but also even when pressured, being able to get out of there. And, exactly what you discussed is what we've seen so much of with Sean McDermott, not knowing which 4 are coming, using the simulated pressures, using the creepers, using those mugged up looks where you're
nickel
not sure
being base
where it is. Yeah, nickel being base is an awful lot of similarities. So with all those things in mind, before we get you out of here, what do you expect to see Sunday night, and give us a score prediction?
Yeah, I expect the Bills to win this football game. I don't expect a lot of offense on the Giants side. I think the defense will try, but they're going to give up explosive plays. They'll probably end up surrendering a long run to James Cook later when you guys are just trying to milk the clock. I have it like 34-6, something like that. I don't know what the implied team total is for the Buffalo Bills right now. And also, I think a lot of this does depend on how Wink Martindale calls the game. If he wants to go balls to the wall and just send the blitz, it's going to lead to some big plays. Maybe you get home, maybe harass Josh Allen, but we don't really have a lot of evidence to suggest that when you do blitz, you're going to get home, because the Giants have blitzed a lot this season and they have not gotten home all that often. So I'm going to go with a big Bills win and another depressing loss for the New York Giants in primetime.
That might be the largest prediction variance that we've ever had on this show. I don't think anyone's ever predicted such a big victory.
Yeah, six is I think a low water mark.
Well, guys, I've been down the road against Seattle. I said it was going to be 28-17. And I was off because they put 6 points up. And now I'm just thinking in my head, they got Daniel Jones hurt. The offensive line is still big. It's like, where are they scoring? They had a pick 6 last week. And
to get the points,
the defense scored 10 points last week. The defense scored more points than the offense because you had field goal. You came away with the takeaway and basically were right in Graham Gano's field goal range. It's just the offense is so inept right now. It's so inept. And I don't know, man. The Bills defense is so good. I can see some defensive touchdowns as well, which the Giants are really accustomed to this year, just surrendering those. So, man, it's not great being a Giants fan right now.
Sorry, buddy.
So one more time before you head out, let folks know about what's coming up on Big Blue.
All right. Yeah, we're actually having cover one, Mr. Eric Turner on Big Blue View, or Big Blue Banter, that is. Big Blue View, it's all good. Big Blue Banter's podcast I do with Dan Schneier of CBS. Go and check it out. We do a lot of X's and O's stuff. We'll be talking with Eric about that, I think, tomorrow. So we're looking forward to that. And also, Big Blue View, do a lot of writing for SB Nation over there. If anybody wants to go and check it out, follow me on Twitter. It's just at Nick Falato. I'm not creative with it. I just have a very unique name and no one else has it. So I benefit from that. That's Falato.
I appreciate it, man. Always fun to have you on. Hopefully the health gets right for the Giants. We can see a little more realistic view of what they have the rest of the season. But hopefully these teams stay healthy Sunday night and we can be able to jump back on it. Yeah, Cal, I really got to work on who we allow as guests on. Nick's hair is fantastic.
I wasn't going to make you feel worse about it, but that was the first thing I noticed when he came on.
It really is fantastic. You look fantastic tonight. I know I saw some tweets earlier that the Giants season was taking its toll on you, and I know that I'm glad that it's coming back into full form.
Thank you so much, guys. Thanks for having me, and you guys, blessings, man. Be well.
Yeah, appreciate you, man. Too. Good luck this weekend.
All right. So, it's hard before we get into all of our fun stuff and the reveal for the new poster for this week, talking to Nick and doing the prep for this. It really is one of those games where, I'll reveal it when I get to my score later on, but the Bills need to get right here. Like they do. They need to get right in this game, and the matchups are set up to allow them to do it.
Yeah. And to elaborate on that, and again, we will get into it with predictions, but get right for me is not coming out and being slow and shooting yourself in the foot a couple of times against an inferior opponent or playing down to the opponent in any way. This is, to me, what I'm expecting to see is getting the ball and going down and driving right away. Like, knowing who you are going up against, knowing what you've put out in the past week, and knowing that you have to get that corrected. And to the point, some of these young guys are going to be getting playing time. Like, I want to see things pretty smooth against a team like this. There really shouldn't be any excuse, even with the injuries, everything that you've gone through. This is a bad football team right now, and they're in a bad way, and they're reeling. And you should smell the blood in the water, and you should go and take every opportunity. The best teams beat the teams they're supposed to. And while it didn't happen last week, I still felt really confident about that game. And I think if you line up those two teams 10 times, the Bills are winning 8 of them. That's just not how this league works. But this one, the Bills should win 10 out of 10 games against the New York Giants. And I don't want it, though, to be just, hey, we limped through and we ended up getting the win and ended up winning by a couple scores and getting the spread, but it didn't look pretty. Like, I want it to look pretty. I want it to be decisive. I want some really good offensive drives. I want good Josh Allen, like all that stuff. That this is the kind of team you just need to have clean against.
So are we ready to do our big reveal of our friends over at Leftern for this week? I will say, as we get ready to show this one, The title for this week's print is New York Times, and I encourage everyone. You can't see it on the view here, but the article of what's there under the view of New York's team are hysterical articles. Really, really funny. Please take the time to look at this and read it. It's really, really well done. But this is week 6 of season 5 of the Leftern Game Day series. It's out now. This week's print again is titled New York Times. It was designed by Rochester artist Justin Doucette. There's 100 stamped and numbered prints that get released each week on Instagram and Twitter from Leftern Co. So make sure to give them a follow. You can purchase them on their website, www.leftern.co. You'll be able to see some of those different pieces here, but this is a perfect piece to bring home if you're going to the game. Lots of Easter egg references are found in the design that you can look through and be able to check those out. So individual print sales for this season help support Buffalo Cares, a local nonprofit that helps find homes for abandoned and sheltered animals locally. And this one really is fantastic. You can see the Metro card has the NY scratched out and says New Jersey. There's a funny article about students teaching New Jersey natives about geography. It's awesome. It's really, really good. Shout out to Justin for his awesome design here and everything that he put into not only the print, but the write-up on the articles were really, really funny.
Not only were they funny, they were good. Like I think he could write for a local paper. It probably took him more time to get those articles written than it did to get all the drawings done. They were good articles. So it's full of Easter eggs, more so than the other ones. Very cool. And why I put that I'm a New York resident under my thing today, because
I love it.
I usually don't love those jokes, but this is a good way,
Yeah.
in my opinion, to make that joke and remember this game. So that's fun.
100%. So make sure you check that out. You'll be able to see the link in the show description here. So make sure you're checking that out. And again, so fun to be able to partner with Greg and Melissa and everybody over at Leftern. It's a great partnership for us. So as we kind of get back into gear here, let's talk a little bit about the injuries and the replacement process of what's there. And I mentioned earlier that there are some challenges, mid-game, it could be really tough. We already had some borderline decisions on who would be called up in game day active. Then you have multiple injuries in game. We already were sitting Greg Rousseau, Christian Benford, multiple other players out of a kind of a sense of caution. And then you lose people at those positions and it makes it really tough in game. So, losing Daquan Jones just sucks because he was having a career season and it's not okay. We don't have anyone that was playing at his level, but Ed Oliver's having an awesome season. Poona Ford is actually a good one tech. Tim Settle and Jordan Phillips are having good seasons. I still feel like we're going to be okay at defensive tackle. It's not Daquan Jones. Again, they're not playing at his level, but the drop off isn't horrible. It's NFL caliber players. At cornerback, last year, we had Dane Jackson and Christian Benford as our starters. We saw that is a functional starting unit. Taron Johnson's still a fantastic nickel. We have the safeties there. The depth at corner is now a challenge, but we're going to be okay. The starting lineup's going to be there. I don't know what the answer is at linebacker. Matt Milano went down. The immediate replacement was Dorian Williams. He was running around with his hair on fire. It was cool. He was also overrunning plays with his hair on fire because he was going so fast and so high speed. We then saw them pivot to Terrell Dodson, who had a Terrell Dodson game. He had some run stuffs. He was good in short yardage. He was good going forward. He got lost in coverage a couple times because that's what Terrell Dodson does. We called up AJ Klein from the practice squad. He basically is Terrell Dodson. He's good in run stuffing. He's good in short yardage. He's good in obvious rundowns. We don't want him isolated in coverage on anybody. So, go through each of the 3 position groups if you feel differently at defensive tackle or corner. But where is your head at what we're going to see at linebacker this weekend and what your expectations are?
I think a little bit. It sucks that it was defensive tackle and linebacker both going out and both playing at such a high level, because I think those positions play so much into each other and the success. We've talked about it a ton on this show, where you saw even last year with Tremaine Edmonds' improvement and Matt Milano's playing clean behind a defensive line that allows you to play clean is a big deal. I think you'll still be able to do some of that. The drop off from Jones it's a deeper drop off than I anticipated it would be even months ago, the way that he was playing. I do like Tim Settle. I like Puna Ford. I like Jordan Phillips.
But he was having a career season.
He's having a career. He's having an all-pro year. He's one of the best in defensive linemen in football, period, for a month.
Yeah.
And so that's tough because I do think that had a trickle effect to how the linebackers were playing when you had Ed Oliver and Taquan Jones just demolishing offensive linemen. Those guys are playing clean. And so I still think you'll get plenty of clean play for the linebackers, whoever it is behind them. Obviously, linebacker is the biggest concern with the amount of unknown. We don't know what Puna Ford looks like in a Bills uniform, but you have data and film of him playing at an NFL level. Jordan Phillips, we know, can play at a super high level in this defense. But again, I get worried about if he's taking on more reps. He hasn't shown the ability to stay healthy and be on the field for a long period of time. So that gives me some concern that depth could get real shaky real quick. But yeah, I think linebacker is the big one just with the amount of unknowns. Your point, the cornerback room, I think there's the unknown this week because Dane Jackson showed up as it did not practice here today, hoping that trends in a better way. Because what we saw from Kaiir Elam doesn't feel great. If he's got to start more, do not love that. But if it is Benford and Dane Jackson, I'm okay there. I can live in that world, especially with all the other parts you have and the scheme and doing all that stuff. But yeah, it's all eyes right now on that interior, that middle of the field and the defensive tackles and the linebacker. And I think they do play together, and I'm interested to see how it all sort of comes together because I don't know that I think there might be an odd rotation right now at linebacker for a little bit where this is working for a little while. We're going to bring in Dotson, and that's going to work for a little bit till he gets burnt. And then maybe we'll try throwing some Balin Spector, maybe wrapped it. Like, I just think that every person now trying to replace that linebacker position probably has a major flaw that's going to rear its head at any point in any game. And that's going to be frustrating. And so linebacker is the big one, the big hole to fill. But I do think that defensive tackle plays into how they'll be able to play behind them.
Yeah. The Terrell Bernard breakout, obviously kudos to him. He has played excellently. It was also because Daquan Jones and Ed Oliver were destroying people in front of
Keeping
them.
them clean. Yeah.
I think there's a chance, obviously I've waffled back and forth so much on the thick dime and whether we're going to see a 3 safety look and what we could do with Taylor Rapp. And obviously Terrell Bernard's breakout has not necessitated more Taylor Rapp in that spot. We saw him come in when Jordan Poyer missed the game. Taylor Rapp looked great in that scenario. He was able to play well in the Miami game. I think there's a chance that we see a bit more. And if we do see some of that rotation or platooning, you could see that where if they're not ready to trust Dorian Williams, then an AJ Klein or Terrell Dodson early downs with a more of a dime look or Taylor Rapp coming in as the other nickel, which we saw him. And that's really what that dime or thick dime or whatever you want to joke about with the third safety. That's what that would be, is having Terrell Bernard in the middle, Taron Johnson on one side, Taylor Rapp on the other, is 2 nickels, basically. That is a possibility. But again, you're now giving up a lot from a run defense standpoint. Taylor Rapp's good, but he's not the same as having an actual run down linebacker like Terrell Dodson or AJ Klein. I think there's lesser of evils there in the pass coverage, but I also don't know how often you can do that. And if a team starts going no huddle and you get caught in that and they start running at you, you're going to have to burn a timeout or what's going to happen there. So I don't know. I'm torn. The ideal is Dorian Williams plays well enough that he can be the athletic guy next to Terrell Bernard. Yeah. He can cover in space. He bridges those two worlds between Taylor Rapp and a Dodson or Klein. But I just, I don't know. I'm excited because I know Eric and Anthony in their breakdowns and taking a look myself. And I know you shared some clips as well. There were flashes from Dorian Williams, but there's also a reason he got benched, and we'll have to see, is he ready for another stab at it here this week?
Yeah. And I do think that is one thing that does maybe not get talked about enough when a player gets benched by Sean McDermott or whatever it is.
Shout out to Alex watching here.
Yeah.
This, I didn't even pick up on this past week, even with Milano going out early. Rapp played 0 snaps. I did not pick up on that.
I do think Sean McDermott really, trusts the scheme. And obviously he knows that there's big players that can do more for his scheme. Like they can do more with Trey White. They can do more with Matt Milano. But I don't I think that ultimately they are going to defer to, hey, we just need to get guys that can be in their position in the scheme when those guys are out and play within it. And so I think they're going to try to stay nickel. I think they're going to try to stay in a more traditional manner. Dorian Williams, we saw a good amount. I think this is, again, a perfect opportunity in the schedule with these injuries coming up and having a full game for Dorian Williams to go play against maybe Tyrod Taylor and the New York Giants. These are the kind of games that is real live practice experience for a guy like that to go run around with your hair on fire, but be able to make those mistakes in a game. And this game's not going to be one where if he makes a couple of mistakes, I don't think that's going to be what costs you the game. You can't do this against Miami. You can't roll Dorian Williams out there against Miami and hope that he figures that out on the fly. This coming stretch here of games, New England Patriots, you're dealing with the next 2 weeks. You have the 2 worst offenses in the entire NFL. They're even worse than the Pittsburgh Steelers. Right now, the Giants EPA per play is second worst behind the Patriots. And then next week you get the Patriots. So these weeks right here are almost, God, I hate to say it, like free practice weeks for the defense and some of these young players coming in. So I think they'll play it out here these next couple of weeks, feel it out. And this might be a great opportunity for those guys. Bobby Babich is a very good coach. If anyone's going to coach somebody up mid-season and make them into a linebacker that's getting better, it's going to be Babich. And so I am excited for Dorian Williams. And I think, to your point, most of Bills Mafia wants it to work out that way, just from the athleticism standpoint, in terms of, the floor or your ceiling drops without Matt Milano, but that floor in terms of athleticism maintains in terms of how you can have linebackers in coverage. Like AJ Klein just shouldn't be in modern NFL dropping back into coverage, and Dotson probably either. And I think you want to be able to have Dorian Williams work out, but he's really got to prove it. He's got to come in and play within the system and play within himself and not try to be Matt Milano. I think that's going to be the dangerous thing right now for these guys, is trying to make up for some of the injuries that have happened. And I don't know that anyone needs to press. Like, you got a pretty good part in the schedule here. You just got to figure out how to play within this scheme together, get that communication dialed in. Cause that's another thing we're losing. Matt Milano's been knee deep in this defense for years, part of this. And that was a big part of Terrell Bernard's benefit also, is playing with Matt Milano. So there's going to be some of that needs to get worked out here, but that's why you've got this little part in the schedule that actually, while those injuries hurt, and nobody wants those kinds of injuries, it couldn't have come at a better time in this season for the Bills right now.
Yeah. And I think that's a key part, certainly in my prediction, and I assume yours as well, is that it's not up to Dorian Williams. It's not up to Christian Benford. It's not up to those guys. This defensive line should absolutely eat against this offensive line. It is the worst offensive line in the NFL right now. We have the most sacks in the NFL, the one of the highest pressure rates or win rates, depending on which stat you look at. They are creating absolute havoc. And now you're going up against a defensive line letting up, on pace for an NFL record in sacks and pressures.
I saw something too.
They need to control it.
Their defense only has 7 something pressures, and Ed Oliver has 9.
Their entire defensive line has 8 tackles for loss.
That's what it was.
Ed Oliver has 9 tackles for a loss. It's not great. And so I know Nick was pretty realistic about Kayvon Thibodeau. He's having an unsustainable season. He has 10 total pressures in all 5 games together, and he's got 6 sacks or 4 sacks. You can't keep that up. No one is going to get 40% of their pressures converted for a sack. The Bills have the most pressures in the league, and even all of them, the highest rate is like in the 30s from a percentage standpoint. So, we'll see where those things are coming from. Most guys are in like the 15 to 25% range is what a normal, for a good pass rusher, that's what you get. So, and here, Alex saying, I don't think the starting off-ball linebacker come week 13 or 14 is on the roster right now. I did put out a tweet, earlier as I was kind of poking around, looking at the list of who could be out there. And again, I mentioned it earlier of where my head is at from a injury standpoint. Obviously, there is a huge drop-off from Trey White and Daquan Jones, but our depth is better prepared at D-tackle and cornerback. Off-ball linebacker, not only is it not our deepest position, it's also one of the most devalued positions around the league. So I was poking around, who are the bad teams that have expiring or cheap, either expiring contracts or cheap contracts. You go like Jack Sanborn got bumped to a backup in Chicago. Malcolm Rodriguez got bumped to a backup in Detroit. Jordan Hicks is an expiring contract in Minnesota. Frankie Louvu in Carolina. Kaiser White in Arizona. Robert Spillane in Las Vegas. They're at least all like starting caliber guys. And I think that your perspective is really sharp. You have 2 weeks here to get a really good read on, can Dorian Williams be that guy? And you let him play against the Giants. You let him play against New England. Get a read for, hey, you want to know what? We're going to be okay here. We're going to be all right. He's picking it up. He's communicating. He's in the right positions in coverage. He knows where it is. And if not, there are some attainable guys who could be a plug-in. They're not impacting the cap long-term. They're simply a plug-in Band-Aid replacement for Matt Milano. Obviously, I think we got as good of news as we could on Milano, that it sounds like it's a fracture and an MCL. It does not look like there's an ACL recovery at this time. Obviously, that can change depending on when they get in there for surgery. But that would lead to a very high likelihood of not only a full return next year, but returning to his exact same level of play, that not having the concern you have with ACL. So I think that your presentation of that, what this presents itself with in the next couple weeks, we can get that read on Dorian Williams and still have a decision point before the trade deadline to figure out, are we going to be okay? Or is this just so many compounding injuries that it's really going to affect our ability to be the Super Bowl contender we want to be? And maybe we do need to make a trade for a Band-Aid.
Yeah, I'm hoping it, obviously, that it is on the roster. I do have faith in these guys to continuously get better, and I think we'll see that here, to your point, over the next couple of weeks here. And it doesn't have to be, Dorian Williams doesn't have to come out in the next 2 weeks and like light the world on fire and have
He doesn't
great
have to
games.
be what Terrell Bernard did.
No,
he doesn't have to
be. It has to be, what I'm looking to see is slow, steady progress, right? Like, don't make the same mistakes over and over again. Don't put yourself in bad situations. Be a net positive. I think if we see small incremental steps of improvement throughout the season, I do think that they will stick with who they've got on the roster. And I'm interested to see too, like, Balin Spector coming back. Does he play into some of this at all? I know they've been high on him and he hasn't been able to stay healthy and get on the field also. So interested to see just how it plays out internally first. I do think that they will try everything they can to get that done internally before they look elsewhere. But to your point, very devalued position throughout the league. And so again,
more attainable than usual.
A decent situation in terms of how can you frame Matt Milano going down as any silver linings or anything. Is a devalued position that you are now in this part of the schedule where you can kind of take a little bit of time to figure it out. So those are the only tiny little bits of silver lining that I can gain out of this.
We get 3 games. We have 3 games. The trade deadline is on Halloween. It's Tuesday, October 31st. So we have the Giants, the Patriots, and the Buccaneers. We get 3 games of full evaluation. 3 games that honestly, regardless of how, let's say Dorian Williams plays, we should win those games. They should be healthy favorites in all 3 games.
Yeah.
The defensive line should allow them to play on defense, and our offense is simply better than all 3 of those defenses. So we'll see where that goes, but it gives them some time for real evaluation before that comes up. And again, it just happens to be one of the most devalued positions, so it makes it more attainable. You're not trading for a left tackle. You're not trading for a wide receiver. You're not trading for a cornerback. Trading for an off-ball linebacker is pretty doable. That is a doable spot in this realm. And I'll use your go-to. We just need adequate play. We don't need, honestly, we need fans to be as frustrated with Dorian Williams as they are with Dane Jackson, and that we're defending that, like, hey, he's in position, he's doing the right things. That was a great play.
Yeah, sure, he doesn't make the play Milano does, but he doesn't give up the big one, right? Like,
correct. He's in position. He's making sound tackles. Yeah, it was 5 yards down the field instead of behind the line of scrimmage because he's not Matt Milano, and he doesn't have that like preternatural understanding of like what they were going to do, but he's doing the right things. Like, I'm hoping that's the arguments we're having. If we see the over pursuit, if we see getting washed out, if we see missed tackles, he's got 3 games to prove that that's not what he is and that he's ready to contribute at a consistent level. And if not, we'll poke around and see what the market has to bear.
Yeah, I am a little worried that this coaching staff likes the makeup of Dotson a lot, and that it is like I think they are going to try to make Dorian Williams work, but are content to play Dotson quite a bit. Like, I know that he struggles, but he's kind of Dane Jackson-y in terms of like he is kind of
disgruntled.
He is in spots that he's supposed to be. I don't like him as much as Dane Jackson. I'm not going to rush to defend him just because if I type his name on the internet, he appears. But
if you type his name 3 times on Twitter at midnight,
if I say it too loud, he might show up here. No, but I have a gut feeling that the coaching staff is much higher on his ability to come in and be that like last case scenario linebacker to get them through the season, and that makes me a little sick.
Yeah, we'll see. One, you're 100% right. They obviously are much more confident in him than we are, than I am, than you are. He was the answer on Sunday. Their first response was, "Hey, get Dorian out there. We're going to see what he does." Dorian's running around with his hair on fire, and he goes flying past the ball. He misses a tackle. He misses another tackle. They sit him down, and they played Terrell Dotson the rest of the game.
Yeah. And Dotson missed a few things. He got flat-footed on a couple of things, but I think from how I watched it, I think he would have graded out probably more positive plays than negative plays in terms of where he was supposed to be within the defense. I don't know those things, but I think he was mostly doing his job.
Yeah, I think he's okay. He played at an adequate level in that game. And that, was able to come in. He actually had. Yeah, I think that the hard part is it comes off as though we're hating on Terrell Dotson, that he's bad at everything. He's not. He actually is pretty good coming forward. He's actually a pretty good
some nice run stops.
Yeah, he's a very sound run defender. Like, he really is good. He reads those gaps. He's a big physical dude. That also applies in blitzing. He's pretty good blitzing because he's big and powerful and athletic. We just don't want him out in space. And that, being able
it's the
to
Chiefs, it's the Dolphins. These are the teams that I'm trying to be, and I want Matt Milano.
Or heck, if Saquon Barkley was healthy, I don't want him out in coverage on Saquon Barkley.
Sure.
It's even that kind of matchup and I'm not worried about it here if Saquon doesn't play, but though he's a guy who's a problem to be able to do that. So without further ado, let's say I'm trying to think whose turn it is.
I went first last week.
So I think it's my turn to go first this time. So it's rare that our guest had a more outlandish, aggressive projection than we do, but I'm not going to be predicting 34-6. I do think that this Giants offensive line is going to struggle. They are really, really rough. We have given up a chunk run play to every single team we faced, every single one. It wasn't Josh Jacobs in the Raiders game. It was that end around to Trent Taylor or whatever his name is. But we've given up a chunk run play to every single team we've played. I have to assume somebody's going to break one off in this game. They'll have, they'll put together 1 or 2 drives. I think that's about it. I've got them with 1 touchdown and 2 field goals. And I think the Bills are going to move the ball pretty much at will. I've got 37-13. This Giants team is not in good position to do much of anything right now. If these were 2 healthy teams, I'd be nervous about being overconfident and worried about dropping 2 in a row and stuff. That they should absolutely control this game. This team is not in position to beat anyone in the NFL right now. Their only win is a comeback against the Cardinals. I think that's going to prove out here. They've got some talent, Okereke, Dexter Lawrence, Kayvon Thibodeau. They've got talent. They've got talented guys that can make plays. I don't think they can keep up as the game goes.
I'm pretty close to you. we're not too far apart here. I think that the Bills are going to come out and punch these guys right in the face. They didn't even play poorly against the Jaguars. It really was just kind of a weird game where they shot themselves in the foot a number of times, or just weird stuff kept coming up. They looked tired. I'm not trying to make excuses. It didn't look like a losing effort necessarily watching it. But the way that everyone's talking about them, like, oh, the Bills drop another one, I think they're going to come out and really put it to them. I do think even there's probably a little bit of Sean McDermott that really would love to stick it to Brian Daboll while he's down here a little bit, especially with some of the stuff that was going on about how Daboll didn't like playing with McDermott. Whether or not any of that's true, there's bulletin board material. And there's these guys get up for stuff that doesn't even make sense. They just pull it out. It's pretend. So I think some of that plays into this. But so I think I have the Bills coming out, punching them in the face. I could see it even like at halftime being, I don't know, 21-3 type of game. Just everybody's like, why did he keep this on Sunday Night Football? What are we doing? This is terrible. What are these red jerseys? Everyone's pissed except for Bills fans. Ultimately, at the end of the game, I have it 31-13. I think Vegas is pretty spot on here. What do they have? A 14-point spread, and it's 44.5. I have it just under.
Yeah, 30-15 is their like implied total. 29.5 technically to 15.
And I even have a hard time seeing them find the 3 drives. I think it's going to have to a late touchdown
special teams,
in garbage time type of thing. A turnover where they settle for a field goal. I just don't. This is a bend but don't break defense, even without Milano and Jones. The scheme itself versus what they're putting out on the field and that offensive line and their EPA type stuff. Like, I just don't think they can string together. It'll have to come on an explosive run or something. I just can't see them stringing together long, sustained drives where they end in touchdowns. I think they might be able to get a couple field goals on the board and maybe a late score when it doesn't matter.
Yeah. So we'll see where it comes into play. There's a possibility of rain, as RJ is mentioning here. I think there's a possibility. It's low percentage, but there's a chance. I think it's easy to tell ourselves that they're gonna want revenge and have all those different things. Daboll's wanted to win all the other games that they've played too, and they've gotten destroyed. I don't care if it's Kyle Shanahan. I don't care if it's Mike McDaniel. I don't care if it's Sean McVay. No one is coordinating a successful offense with this offensive line. It's
Tyrod Taylor too. Like, if it is, like, no offense, I love Tyrod. I love what he did here.
Yeah.
He's just not that dude anymore. Like that, you're not going to have a ton of offensive success, I don't think, with behind this offensive line with an aging quarterback and probably not Saquon Barkley. It's probably too much for them to overcome at this point.
Yeah. So we'll see where it goes. I'm curious to see what comes of this here, but this is a game where they absolutely have every possibility to be able to earn a very solid, comfortable win, and I expect them to do so. I really do.
Yeah.
All right. One final thing before we get anybody out of here. People ask us all the time the best way to be able to help us out and how they can support us here at Cover One, and the best way is to sign up for our OnePass with this message here. Many people ask us the best way to support us here at Cover One, and that is to sign up to become a Cover One OnePass member. That contribution helps give us the access to all the data and information we use to create the content that you love.
And I think most importantly, brings you into our community of insiders. It's a great community based on Slack. I know a lot of people don't want to be on social media anymore or be in on those conversations. We bring all of it to you right in our great community of educated fans. And most importantly, you get access to our content creators.
Even better than that, everybody loves merch. You get awesome t-shirts, a cool decal, and a letter from the Cover One team signed directly to you.
All for $60. That gets you the entire season, next year's free agency and draft. $60. Click the link in the description. Cover One Insider. Become one today. Greg, I may have lied a little bit last week. I do still stand by what I said after the postgame show that Cover One, I think, shines after losses. I think it's where we put out our best content. I think it's what creates a lot of the brand loyalty we have with our Slack members, is being able to help people get through that time. But also, if you aren't a Slack member yet, get in there before we get rally off a bunch of wins. Because while we are good at getting you through the loss, there is nothing better than hanging out in Slack all week and being part of the Cover One OnePass membership after wins. Wins are so much better. Yeah. So I lied a little bit. Wins are still a really good part of the Cover One community.
Absolutely. So there's a lot of you guys in here watching. We appreciate it. Make sure you press the like button. It really helps us out. Press that like button. Leave us a comment with your description or your projection of what you think the game is going to turn out to be here, and your score prediction for the Bills versus the Giants, so we can check out what your thoughts are, and then we'll go back and see who got closest after the game. But tonight's been a ton of fun. It was great to have Nick Falato on from Big Blue View and everything that he was able to share. Obviously, awesome producer Chris Kepner was in there getting your comments up here on the screen. But on behalf of Aaron Quinn, I'm Greg Tompsett. You've been listening to Cover One Buffalo, and we are out.